In this episode of the Colm podcast, brought to you by thelасtlines.net, I talk to Ireland's youngest embalmer, Ronan Conneely. Coming from a family of undertakers and funeral directors, Ronan tells me he grew up around death and passing.
When I was about 16, I started, so I'd be going into school in the morning and I could have been out at 2 or 3 in the morning picking up someone.
I can imagine if it's a sudden or unexpected death, perhaps maybe a road accident or someone very sick in their bed, and you're the first one maybe on the scene after, of course, the police and everything. How did it affect you, or did it affect you? And explains that while others might run a million miles from the profession, how it became his passion in life.
It's a stressful job, but the fulfillment you get from it is amazing. To be able to, help them during the tough days.
We chat about how embalming actually works and why it's needed today more than in the past, something I found fascinating.
With the introduction of more modern medicine, the benefits are amazing, but when the person passes away, the actual process of decomposition, it can be sped up.
And Ronan tells me how he's sometimes reluctant to tell others about what he does and why he has to sacrifice his personal life for his professional life. How do you cope, Ronan, when it's an unnatural death that you're dealing with?
A big thing that everyone always says to me is, oh, you're probably desensitized to it. And I think the complete opposite. I don't think you ever do. I think you get better at handling your emotions.
This is the Colm podcast, and my guest today is Ireland's youngest embalmer, Ronan Conneely.
So I'm Ronan Conneely. I'm a funeral director and embalmer from Galway, and I live in the Claddagh.
So you're in the Claddagh, Ronan?
Yeah.
What's it like there today?
It's funny. So I'm within a 10-minute walking distance of my 2 family funeral homes. So it's a blessing in that, I'm always nearby, but it's a curse as well, trying to kind of get away as well. It can be tough. They always know where to find you.
So you never get a day off, ever?
No, it's part of the I suppose the business. It's a 7-day. It's a vocation, really.
And you are Ronan 22 or 23?
22.
22. And this is unique in that both your mum and your dad, before they got married, they both came from undertaking businesses. They were families of funeral directors.
So it's really unique, and I think it's always kind of difficult to explain. But so there's the Conneely side of my family and the O'Flaherty side. So I'd be the 5th generation funeral director on the Conneely side and the 4th generation on the O'Flaherty side. So I was born into it. I suppose it was always very normal for me, and it's amazing how it's, I suppose, adapted over the years as well. The Conneely side of the family, that would have started by manufacturing coffins and caskets up until the late 90s, early 2000s, and then we stopped the manufacturing business, but we're still connected to it in some way. We distribute coffins on behalf of a supplier in the south of the country, Humphrey Lynch. So we still distribute coffins to the west of Ireland. But then I suppose over the years we moved into the funeral directing side, and then when the embalming became more common, my granddad, he, I suppose, introduced it in the west of Ireland. He kind of saw the need for it.
When you say the embalming came in, before the embalming, what was the standard, or what happened to the body?
It was during the week I was speaking to. So we deal with a lot of the funeral directors in Galway, and we provide the embalming service for them. And one of the funeral directors, he was saying to me that he was speaking to his dad, and he was asking him, and what would happen if a body started to, go bad or something during a funeral. And he said it was just natural for the families to just put the lid on the coffin. Whereas I think it became, the need for embalming became a lot more important in more recent years with the introduction of more modern medicine. The benefits are amazing, but when the person passes away, the actual process of decomposition, it can be sped up. So embalming, the need for embalming became more common. And especially now with, like yourself over in America, a lot of Irish families have relatives abroad. So the funeral might be slightly delayed. So the need for a slight bit of preservation is is I suppose more common now.
It's neat. That's so interesting because of the medications that we can take. It keeps the body alive for longer, but then when someone passes, it can decompose faster.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose your body, it can't break them down when it passes away. And another thing that is common is sometimes people are being kept alive for too long as well, which is something that wouldn't have happened long ago because there weren't the resources to be able to perform that. Whereas now they're in place. So sometimes people they're beginning to pass away, but they're still alive. If you get me.
I know what you
So
mean.
the need for embalming has nearly become essential now. If people would like to view a remains.
Wow. And when you said, Ronan, you have the two family businesses, when your parents got married, did they amalgamate them into one funeral directors?
Yeah, no, so it's funny that both businesses are still operated separately.
So they're in competition. Your mom and dad's businesses are competing.
Yeah, I think it's kind of friendly competition, but my dad actually he works with my mom in O'Flaherty's. So she was actually the first female president of the Irish Association of Funeral Directors, and they mainly operate a funeral directing business. And then my uncle Robert Conneely, he operates Conneely's Funeral Directors. So we take care of, and I hate using people as a statistic, but I think it's the best way of representing it. But nearly 85% of the people who pass away in Galway, and if every person who passes away, if they have 4 or 5 family members, you can imagine, how many people we're dealing with every day. So it's a stressful job, but the fulfillment you get from it is amazing. To be able to, help them during the tough days.
That's the majority of the county of Galway, that
Yeah,
you were there for people at their darkest and lowest moment.
I touched on it in that article that it's a privilege and an honor to be trusted. Families they're opening their doors, they're letting you in. You're trusted to take care of their loved one. So that when my friends they always ask me, and does it have to be 7 days a week, or can you not take a weekend off? You can imagine that there's no time scale to death. There's no way of predicting it. So I've embalmed through the night. I've embalmed early. I heard it a couple of weeks ago that funeral directors they work from dark until dark, which can be a long time in the summer. But you don't know when you could get a call. When I was about 16, I started taking care of the coroner removals with my dad. So I'd be going into school in the morning, and I could have been out at 2 or 3 in the morning, picking up someone and taking them as far as the hospital. So
Wow.
it's something that I've always been involved in. And
Yeah, let's go back. What age were you when you first started? What age were you when you realized that your parents, your family was involved in a business or an industry that was different than most?
I suppose my parents, they were brilliant at kind of keeping it separate at home, but it's a job that you can't really leave at the door completely. So from a young age, families would come to our house, they'd ring the doorbell, and they'd be like, "Is Katrina around?" Would be my mom, and she'd be like, "Oh, we've a bit of bad news. Can we go in and speak with her?" Or even the landline in a house. I remember when I was probably 10, that when that'd start ringing, I'd answer it, and I'd say, "Oh, 1 second, I'll just get my mom." So it was always there. And the funny one I always say is that we, myself, my brothers, and my sister, we could be sitting in the car killing each other,
Yeah,
and the phone would ring.
fighting in the back.
Phone would ring, and we'd stop. And if it was a family on the phone to my mom or my dad, we'd just stop arguing. But if it was my dad or something just calling her, we'd go back to normal. But it was like we understood at a young age the work they did. The other thing is you'd always have people in your class and in school who'd talk about it. And my parents were taking care of some of their grandparents. So from a young age, you'd see how grateful people were for the work they did, which I suppose gave me an interest in going into it.
So you were 15 or 16, you're in school and you're helping out, but going out with your father, you said that was in the hearse, was it, to collect people when they had passed
Yeah.
away? So that could be any time, day or night.
That could be any time, yeah. So my hours were usually nighttime hours. That's when they'd get me. And so myself and my dad would go out, and a coroner's collection. That's what we'd call them. It's where someone passes away suddenly, where they don't know what they passed away from. And basically, there needs to be an examination in the hospital. So our job is to go out and just to bring the deceased safely to the hospital. That's what we do. We transport them there so that the examination can take place.
And for someone who's 15, 16, was it difficult? I can imagine if it's an sudden or unexpected death, perhaps maybe a road accident or someone very sick in their bed, and you're the first one maybe on the scene after, of course, the police and everything. So you have to go in and remove the body from the location it is. Maybe it's not
Yeah.
always a pleasant sight, and you're bringing that as dignified as you can into the back of the hearse. And how did it affect you, or did it affect you?
A characteristic that I suppose is needed in this industry is you have to be able to switch off. So if you're constantly carrying the load, it'll eventually break you down. So I think being able to just, once you get home, that's it, it's done. Um, and I don't know if that's learned or if it's in you, or if it is because I was surrounded by it, is it more natural?
But for
Yeah,
maybe if it was like your father or your family members who have been doing it for longer, they might have thicker skin. But when you're
yeah.
that young and impressionable,
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I never had a problem. I used to actually, it sounds weird, but I used to, when my dad would wake me up in the middle of the night, I'd enjoy it, you know? I think the idea of being able to help my parents is what I really liked, and to be able to help the family business. Um, a big thing that like everyone always says to me is, "Oh, you're probably desensitized to it," and I think the complete opposite. I don't think you ever do. I think you get better at handling your emotions, but it's completely natural. Do you know? Um, Being able to switch off is really important. But don't get me wrong, there are plenty of funerals where I'm at the back of the church and the eulogy, the people are talking about their loved one, and it's upsetting and stuff. But thankfully, the majority of funerals, they aren't sudden deaths where people don't have any answers, or it's someone who's lived a full life. And the Irish are brilliant at celebrating death. You know yourself in Ennis, the it's a celebration where people, they'll meet up, family from all over the world, come back, cousins, everything. The neighbours will come, friends, family. They'll show old photos. They'll tell stories. They'll joke about it. And it's really immersive where everyone comes together. And
and they'll sing by the graveside. I was at a funeral in Sligo recently where they played music by the grave. They prayed the whole rosary. It was the whole community was there. You're right. There's something beautiful about that.
yeah, and then I suppose that's what led me to that's what I suppose gave me an interest in the embalming, because in Ireland the remains is the centerpiece of the funeral. So a traditional Irish funeral would have a reposing or a wake. Um, then the following day there'd be a mass, and then a burial. That'd be a traditional Irish funeral. And in each one of those stages, the remains is the center point. So for the reposing, people will come in, and the remains is usually across Ireland in the center of a big room where people will come in, they'll sympathize with the family, and then they'll spend time with the remains. And then the remains will be brought to the church. So the remains will be on view for the reposing, and then they'll be brought to the church, but the mass is celebrated around their life. And then at the grave, like you said, people will tell stories, they'll sing songs, they'll pray, they'll, you know, they'll read a poem, or they play music, and it's everything is to do with the person, which is amazing. Then afterwards they'll go off and they'll have a meal. Long ago they have plenty of drink, and it's
And still
it's
today.
yeah, it's still done today. Yeah,
Yeah, what I think
um,
is beautiful about it as well, and I don't know if this is, I'm sure it's not unique to Ireland, but if it's widely practiced around the world where you see the body is lying in wake and you can go up. But I remember even as when we were children, it was never shied away from. When we went to a coffin, you'd be lifted up to see the body and it would be
yeah,
there. And I remember putting my hand out and feeling even my gran, her hand, kind of very cold and stiff. But it helps families and people probably come to terms with the loss and the grief that there is the body, the person is in front of you, it looks like you remember, and it is dead. Then the lid is put on, then the coffin is brought to the graveyard. And even in Sligo, seeing the family members take turns of putting the dirt on and just
yeah,
shoveling for the whole
yeah.
entire
I definitely think it helps giving people closure.
Yeah, closure.
And like that, whenever we get an opportunity to involve the family, even if it's little kids, giving them flowers, or what we always say is, "Do you want to tuck in, Granny?" Do you know when the lining of the coffin
Yeah.
and get the way Granny used to tuck you in? Do you want to tuck her in now? She's asleep, and it just gives the families an opportunity to play a part in the funeral, and I think that definitely helps the grieving process. But going back to kids in Ireland even understanding, it's amazing when we're in the hearse, the respect that is shown. I don't know, is it taught in Ireland or is it just the way we are? But kids will stop, if they have a hat on, they'll take it off. These are young kids, cars will stop in the middle of the road. They'll allow the funeral procession to pass.
It's a beautiful thing that you'd hope we never lose that in Ireland.
Yeah, and I'd hate to see us lose it. And I think a lot of people thought during COVID that funerals would have changed drastically. Um, but it's amazing that we've been able to incorporate technology into it, with the likes of, slideshows and like memory albums or whatever. We're able to live stream funeral masses for people who mightn't be able to attend, and your traditional book of condolence, you can now do that online, so people can still sympathize with the family from the other side of the world. And I don't think the traditional funeral has even changed that much.
And so when you were in your teenage years, Ronan, and you were in school, did you ever think you would go down a different path? Because when people grow up in family businesses, some of them gravitate towards it, and some people want to run a million miles and think, I never want to work with my family. Are you crazy? So what were you thinking?
I think I was always interested because I think it ties back to having the pride in what my family have done. They're two of the oldest families in Galway and two of the oldest family businesses. So it's amazing to be able to keep it going for another generation. And as soon as I started helping out at the funerals and just even going to see how funerals are and what you have to do and stuff like that, the amount of people that had come up to me and they say to my family, "Oh, you must be so proud that Ronan's interested in it," and stuff. And I never thought about doing anything else. And I don't know what I'd do. And I wonder if I hadn't been born in the business, if I ever would have gravitated towards it. It's something that I always question myself.
That's a good question, yeah. But what do you think you would be doing if you weren't born into that business? Like, and that comes back to you. Is it taught or is it in you? Would you have found that naturally anyway?
Yeah, because it's amazing the amount of people that aren't born into the family business in Ireland who do gravitate towards it. And we have a brilliant team here, and it's full of people who they love what they do. And I always think back, Tony, one of our lads, he always says he worked in hospitality in hotels, and he always says his one regret is not working in the funeral industry sooner, because he loves it that much. So I think it's one of those things that some people like that, they'd run a mile from it, and others would really enjoy it. But they just it can probably be a hard industry it'll be a big jump, a big leap to, go into it if you had no connections or family in it or anything like that.
What type of person who hasn't grown up within a family business, a family undertakers, what kind of person has gravitated towards the job or suited to it?
A big characteristic of a funeral director is it goes back to that of it being a vocation. There isn't a timeline. There isn't set hours. I know now in other countries that someone won't answer, a company mightn't answer a phone after 6 o'clock. But it's very much still a thing in Ireland that we're there 24/7. When you're stuck, you can give us a call. So I think somebody that understands that it's very important. That'd be a very important characteristic to have. But definitely caring would be important. And one thing that my uncle always says is, when you see a funeral director, a lot of the work is done. But he said sometimes you'll see them, and the best thing to be is like a duck. So you have to be calm on the surface, and you can be paddling like mad underneath. So even if sometimes stuff might be going right, you have to just, I suppose, be calm and patient, and
Yeah, because it's already such a traumatic time for the family. You don't want to,
Yeah, you don't want to
like,
add to that by stressing them even more.
we forgot to put diesel in the hearse, so we're going to have to
Yeah,
make a pit stop here at the end. So you don't want to be doing that, you know.
yeah,
But it's interesting that when you're saying a duck nice and smooth on the surface, and then the legs going crazy under the water. And maybe back to when I was asking you about those heavy scenes that you come across, especially as a young person going in 2 a.m. There's a body there that needs to be moved, and you were saying that people ask you, are you desensitized to it? But maybe you can not you're not desensitized, but you can disconnect in the moment because
yeah,
you have to get the job done. So if it's a car crash, if you would take in the how horrific the scene is, you'd probably be, frozen. But you have to disconnect to a certain extent to get the job
yeah,
done.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I suppose it reminds me because I still to this day people say, how can that young lad do the job? And then I'm questioning myself. So I suppose maybe subconsciously I disconnect, but it's something that has never bothered me. Um, and I'm thankful that it hasn't, because the work that I'm able to do because of that is so rewarding.
I think it's the same a little bit with what we do sometimes when we go to, for example, Ukraine earlier this year. And people often ask our entire crew, how do you meet all those families who have lost loved ones? They're telling us the stories on camera. But
Yeah,
and you're not, you've empathy, you're not desensitized, but there is a tiny disconnect in that you're thinking of the work that has to be done. We're thinking
yeah,
of those cameras recording. Is this everything working? Is that sound of the helicopter outside too loud? So while you're there, your head is also in work mode as well. And then, like you, it's sometimes later when we come back and we watch the interviews, that's when it really hits us. So I think it's
yeah.
probably the same with you as well. Um,
And like that, as a reporter, you're, I suppose you're not the centerpiece of the issue you're reporting. And funeral directors aren't the centerpiece of funerals. Embalmers aren't the centerpiece. The person who's passed away, they're the main focus in the family, helping them get through it. So our job, it's not about us. We just have to support that family over the duration of the funeral and even afterwards with help and stuff like that. And I suppose if we were as upset as they were, we'd be no help to them.
yeah, and it's not a case of not caring or having empathy,
Yeah,
because actually it is caring because you want to get the job done properly, and
exactly.
as best you can for the person. And to do that, that is the like paramedics, I'm sure, and doctors and
Yeah.
firefighters. So Ronan, when you were in school, were you like, sod this, I'm not doing the leaving cert, I don't care about the final exams at the end of high school because I know what I'm doing for the rest of my life. I know the business I'm getting into. Or did you still need to get a qualification?
Well, I wasn't given much of a choice by my parents. They always said that you're too young to kind of make a decision. It was always in the back of my head, but I sat all of my leaving cert exams, and I actually didn't, though it was during COVID. But I got my leaving cert, and then I finished a commerce degree in college. But during my commerce degree, I made the decision to start my embalming course, which was a 3-year course, but I finished it in a year. So I was able to do that alongside my commerce degree. So I did take a lot on, but it was something that I wanted to do. And it benefited the family. I was able to help out. I became a little bit more valuable. Um, so that was
And
very important to me.
where do you do an embalming course, Ronan? And is it a mix of theoretical and practical? Is it mainly hands-on? What's it like?
Yeah, so there's two elements. There's the theoretical side and then there's the practical side. So um you kind of do it in conjunction, one with the other. Now, I was lucky that I come from a family business, so I had experience with the practical side. Seeing my aunt. My aunt was the first female embalmer in Galway. So seeing her work, my uncle work, seeing my mom help with the bodies, Um, so I had experience with that, but the theoretical side, they couldn't help me with that. I just had to study for those exams. And the certificate I have is, I got the same one as my granddad and my aunt, which is the British Institute of Embalming, which will be one of the older institutes in the world, and it would be seen as one of the most prestigious institutes. Um, so what that means is basically one element of funerals which is becoming more common are repatriations, where somebody say for example, somebody may be visiting Ireland from Australia and they may pass away. So in order for a body to be repatriated for sanitation purposes and to, prevent the spread of diseases, embalming is required. And in certain countries, they'll only accept bodies from certain institutes. So people with certificates from certain institutes. So my certificate allows me to work across the world, which opened the door then to the international work that
That's incredible. Yeah,
I'm able.
I read that in the newspaper, the article that was written about you in the Irish Examiner, Ronan, and it said that you were on this elite list of embalmers that's very exclusive and it's difficult to get onto that list. But because of where you studied and the fact that you did it in 1 year instead of 3, you're obviously top of your game at such a young age. So you're on this list. What does it mean then if you're on the list? Who could potentially call you to do what kind of work?
Like the work you do with the Vatican, a lot of it is private, and I think that is very important. But the basics of the work I do with that company, it say for example, if there was a, a disaster in the world, it could be like an environmental disaster or a plane crash or something like that. I'm on call, so I could get a call, and I may have to go over and take care of those people. So that alongside like other work, I think in the article I mentioned like a cruise ship, and it's a lot of things that even I hadn't thought of. If someone passed away in the middle of the sea and they're miles away from a coast or whatever, there are lots of little different things that people wouldn't think of.
And I'm sure this happens a lot of people because it's generally older people who are getting cruises. So they must have people passing all the
Yeah,
time on the ships.
yeah, and I was as surprised when the company reached out to me. But it was an honor, and I thought that I'd give it a go while I'm young and while I have the opportunity and the chance. And yeah, it's amazing, and it's given me a great chance to improve my skills, to get even better at what I do, and yeah, to continue learning, because it's one of those things that the more one thing I found with the embalming is, and from working with other embalmers, is that there are lots of different ways to get to the end product. There are lots of different methods, and the more you have, the better for different scenarios. And it's amazing how many different ways you can achieve the final product, which is a good ending. So it's amazing to be able to learn those skills and continue like improving. And it's
Do you have one set of procedures and chemicals or processes to use for everybody, or does it vary from person to person that you are embalming? So do you have to come with like a fully equipped stock because you don't know what you're going to be dealing with?
one of the, I suppose, good aspects of our job is that it's different. It's not like a factory. It's not like everybody's the same. It's like in life, everyone's a little bit different. And because of that, you need to no two cases are the exact same. So because of that, yeah, you're constantly improvising, you're constantly adapting. And because of that, we use lots of different things, and there's no set recipe.
And Ronan, how do you describe your job to the ordinary person on the street? Is it just to restore the natural look to the body as it would have been prior to death, or how do you describe it?
I wouldn't, I'd be quite reserved in what I say. I feel like it's a really private thing. And I'm trusted by families to take care of someone. So I'm always conscious of that. But I suppose that's a great way of describing it. Trying to restore the lifelike appearance after death, because there are naturally post-mortem changes. So there are a few different processes that we can implement that help achieve that lifelike appearance for the duration of the funeral.
And of course, we all know you have the cosmetic aesthetics, the makeup and the hair and all that. But then are there a few, like there's the chemical aspect of it as well? Is there a physical
So
one?
the way I describe embalming, there are 3 stages. So there's the sanitation aspect, the disinfection, there's the preservation, and then there's the presentation. So there's three ways of achieving that final goal. And like I said earlier, there are loads of different methods of achieving that final goal. But as long as that's good at the end, there are different ways of doing it. So the disinfection is just to help keep people safe. So the family, us as the funeral directors, and the people who are sympathising with the family, who, you know yourself, down in Ennis, people will be leaning in like that. Kids will give Granny a kiss in the coffin. So we just want to make sure that everything's safe. and prevent the spread of any infections. So that's our initial focus. Then what we'll do is the next stage then is preservation. So in Ireland, funerals, they typically last about 3 days, and they're nearly straight away after the person's passed away. So we're able to limit the amount of preservatives we need to use. So unlike the likes of, say, America or the UK, where a funeral may be delayed for a month, so 3 weeks to 4 weeks, where lots of preservatives are needed, that gets rid of the lifelike feel, and it kind of has that stiff effect on someone. So thankfully, because the funeral is so soon after the person has passed away, we don't need to use harsh preservatives, and we're able to keep it as natural and lifelike as you described. And then that ties in then with the presentation, which is the big thing in Ireland. So it's just restoring the natural appearance of the person. So with women, we might have to, do their hair and makeup. Even with men, your pallor is one of the first things that'll fade when you pass away. So just restoring it. But my uncle always says that, would you prefer to see, say, when dealing with men, would you prefer to see your dad with a bruise on his cheek or a face full of makeup? So it's drawing that fine line between a natural look and like a really heavy made up look. So that's something that you're always conscious of. And my way of doing with it, my process would be, I'd always aim for less is more, because it's much easier to put some more makeup on, or allow families, like I said earlier, give them an opportunity to play a part, like painting their mom's nails or helping with their mom's hair, because they would have done that when she was in the nursing home or something like that. It's giving them an opportunity. So it's much easier to be able to add a little bit on than being told by a family to take some away.
And do
So
you
we'd always
do,
go for a natural appearance.
Ronan, do you do the cosmetics as well as the,
Yeah,
you
so
do everything?
alongside, we've a team, we've a girl in here, and my mom helps out my aunt. There's a crew of us, and we'd all help out. But even like with men, sometimes you might need to trim a beard or shape up a beard or give a haircut. So there are lots of different aspects,
Because I
and
believe
just setting the features naturally.
like even though the person is deceased, some features may continue to grow for a while after the person has passed
Yeah,
away.
well, you wouldn't get any significant
Okay.
change, but just no more than yourself. If you were going to a wedding in the morning, your partner would make sure your hair was cut and your beard looked well. Do you know?
Paula, my girlfriend, would whip me into shape to make sure that I looked okay.
Exactly, yeah. So it's the same for that. If that's the way I'd always describe it. If you were going to a wedding, how would you like to look? Do you know? You'd be looking your best, or else your partner, your girlfriend would be giving out to you. So we do the same for the funeral.
Do you have a few photographs that you work from? The family give you a few photos of the person?
That definitely always helps. But sometimes you're working on such a short time frame that you don't even get a chance to see a photograph.
Really?
The people, they know their loved one better than anyone else.
Yeah.
But we're always working alongside families, and we all have the same end vision and goal. So that helps.
How long does it normally take to embalm a body, typically?
So there are the different stages, but a body could be in our care for between 4 and 5 hours, from the point at the start up until the point where they're settled in the coffin in their final resting place. But then sometimes we could be minding a remains for a few days, and
So you would have to maybe top up and go back and embalm further and
yeah, and like a big thing is it's amazing the amount of moisturizer we'll use. But your body will naturally dehydrate an awful lot. So we use lots of moisturizer if we're keeping someone for a few days. And that's
how long
really common.
you mentioned in the UK and maybe in the States for various reasons they can wait much longer for the funeral and they have to use more preservatives, but typically like how long could you keep a body in a state that it would be recognizable and presentable and safe and all of that?
I suppose I can only speak from my own experiences, but I've had remains that I've kept for between 5 and 6 weeks, and they've held their appearance. But there are lots of different variables. It depends on the condition of the remains before starting, and like I said earlier, every single case is different. Obviously, some will react slightly better than others. But yeah, it depends. You in America, they have extreme ways of doing everything. So you probably have people that are kept for a year or stuff like that. But in Ireland, typically most funerals are 5 days at the longest, or so that's the majority of the work that we do. So because of that, we're able to really focus on making the person look as natural as possible.
I'm thinking, Ronan, your job is kind of split into a few different areas. You have your kind of rescue and recovery in the middle of the night when you're going to collect a body and bring it for an autopsy, perhaps. And then you have the embalming. But then is there an element of counselor as well? Because when the family come in to see it, to kind of give you the okay when they look at their loved one and the makeup and all that, I'm sure it's very, like, that's the height of emotion for them and you're standing there beside them.
Yeah, I suppose it's kind of built into the work we do, where I wouldn't say we are counseling families, but we probably are supporting them throughout the entire process. Um, and that's part of the work we do. And like I said earlier, a lot of the work the funeral directors do, when we have our suits on and we're standing by the hearse at the graveside, you know, a lot of our work is done prior to that. And a lot of people don't understand that. Like you said, between the collecting and preparing and caring for them over a few days, um, a lot goes on behind the scenes. But I think it's nice that it's so discreet and people don't know about it. I think that's a sign that we're doing our job well.
What do you do, Ronan, in the case where, as you mentioned, sometimes you might be called to a horrific road accident in another part of the country and you're trying as best you can to embalm the body and restore it to some sort of original look, but maybe the injuries just won't let you do that? Do you have
Yeah,
to break? Do you have to break it to the family?
it's one of the frustrating aspects of our job. Or another one is if someone has passed away and they may not have been found for a period of time, where it's not possible for us to do our job, where it's gone too far. And that's one of the frustrating sides, because you want to give every family the opportunity to say goodbye. But like everything, you don't always get that chance. Um, but I suppose that's where I'm trying to gain as much experience and knowledge, because I'm so young, and I really appreciate the opportunity I've been given by my family that have given me these other opportunities. Um, so I really want to continue to learn and develop my skills. So hopefully that becomes less and less common. And I suppose, like everything, as you know, our suppliers probably get better at producing chemicals. There may be solutions to these problems we're having now in the future. So it's something that I suppose I'm committed to spending my life at trying to get better, to hopefully give those families the opportunity that they may not have gotten in the past.
How do you cope, Ronan, when it's an unnatural death that you're dealing with? Like, for example, a young person. Because as you said, most of the funerals are elderly people. Thank God they've lived
Celebrations,
a full life. It's a celebration of life. And there's a natural feeling to it. When you see an elderly person in a coffin, as sad as it is, you feel this is the natural cycle of life.
yeah, you see them with their family, their grandkids, and you see the kind of circle repeating, and it's amazing to see. But with young people, it doesn't get easier. It's tough. Especially, I'm a young person in Galway, and Galway, you know yourself, it's not a big city. So if a young person passes away, I more than likely know them or know of them or know mutual friends or family. So it's tough because you do have a connection to that person. Um, and it's one of those things that you have to separate yourself. I suppose, like you said earlier, there is an element of disconnecting, and you have to step into that role to be able to help the family. And it's not an easy thing to do, but I suppose I've always had the support of my family. They've had a lifetime of experiences, and their families before them have had experience doing it. So I feel like each generation, I think we get slightly better, and that's our goal, you know, to be able to help the families.
I remember a teacher in Ennis where I went, Manixbury, who since passed away. He was a great teacher. I had him for English, wonderful guy. And he was talking about that the natural cycle of things, but when it's turned on its head, it's just so much more, yeah, because it's, the granny is looking in at the grandson or daughter in the coffin when it should be the other way around.
Yeah,
That
it's tough, and I don't think it'll ever be easy. Um, but I suppose if we can just offer the smallest bit of help to families, that's all. If we can do that much, it's rewarding. Um, so that's the role that's our goal to be able to fill that role for them.
It must be difficult as well. I read about, the rates in Ireland of people who take their own lives, and you see how upset families are when they've lost someone, and what they would do to bring them back or hold on to them. So then when you're looking at maybe a young person and you probably wondering, I mean, who knows what was going through their head. You're looking at them in front of you.
Definitely, it definitely gives you a different perspective on life, where you're like, geez, I should really cherish every day, check in on people. Do you know, that's a big thing. How are your friends getting on? And it definitely gives you a more positive perspective as well, where you need to look at it in a positive way, to just try and do your best in your life. It's an unfortunate thing, but it's something where we'll all experience a death in our family, and then we'll all pass away ourselves. We won't live forever. And I suppose being surrounded by it every day does give you a more positive perspective on that, where like that, do what you like to do. And I suppose just, yeah, that's what you have to do, you know?
Yeah, most young people your age think they're invincible and that they're immortal and they'll live forever. But because you're around death every single day, has it made you think more about your own mortality? Has it made you fear death or fear death less? Or
Yeah, I don't actually know if I think about it any more than anybody else. I feel like with any job, you do go into autopilot, and it becomes your life where you're doing it every day. But a big thing with me is I feel like, and it helps me get through the likes of those with people who've passed away from unnatural causes or young people, is that I think it definitely helps. It helps me personally to think of them in a better place where they aren't suffering. And it's amazing that in Ireland, the amount of faith that people have towards death. And I think people turn to it and it helps them through it.
yeah, I want to ask you about that because I saw that in the article in the Irish Examiner about you. It was down near the very end that you
They
do
threw it
have.
in there.
They threw it in at the very end because I was reading the great article, by the way. Who wrote it again?
Um, a woman by the name of Sarah. I forget. I'd have to double check her second name, but she was brilliant. She was really easy to speak with, more than yourself. And it was actually, I was speaking with her, and I think we spoke for an hour and a half, and I had completely forgotten what I had said. So seeing that article was the first time that ever. It was my first impression was the same as everyone else's.
I thought it was really just such an interesting story and yeah, really well written article and great quotes from you. But down at the very end, I was like, oh wow, because I work here at the Vatican covering Pope Francis, and you said even in the case of a sudden death, it's amazing to see families coming together and supporting each other through difficult times. I myself have a lot of faith, which gives me a more positive outlook on death. So, did you grow up in a Catholic family or?
Yeah, so I grew up in a Catholic family. I, like a lot of other Irish people, went to a Catholic primary and secondary school, and I served my time as an altar boy in primary school. But the big thing for me was I saw families turning to faith when they were struggling. And I was listening to your one of your other episodes, and you described it well. It's not a complete accurate way of describing it, but you said when the bullets are flying, there's no atheists in the trenches. And I think it's a good way of summing it up, that when people are struggling, they search for that. And it helps an awful lot of people. You'll even see, like, it's a massive tradition in Ireland where you'll have a month after the person has passed away, you'll have the month's mind mass. And once again, the families will get together. So faith and the church is still a central part of funerals.
And your own faith, has your work affected it in any way, made you more faithful, less faithful? Do you ever think when you see especially young people if there is this great God, why are these young people dying and no fault of their own? They got cancer or
Yeah, I suppose you'll always have questions, but my outlook on funerals, and I think this could be one of the things that helps me through the entire process is I don't know if I meant to do it, but I always before we close the coffin, I always say in my head as I'm going over to get the lid of the coffin, it's something that I've never actually said it to anyone, but I'd always say that that person is in a better place and they're not suffering, and I think that's just something that I believe.
so there's something that you just it feels right and comfortable to you.
It makes me feel comfortable, yeah, throughout the process. So
What's your plan for the future, Ronan? Do you want to stay in beautiful Galway? Do you want to move to another part of Ireland? Do you want to go over to the United States of America? Or what would you like to do?
I think I think I'm happy with the profession I'm in. Um, so I think while I'm young, I'd love to, if that allows me to travel, I'd love to be able to do that and continue to learn.
But sure, you can't even get a day off, Ronan. You can't even get a Saturday or a Sunday off to go for an ice cream.
That's something that maybe I'd look into maybe teaching, because unfortunately I can't take care of, and Galway's growing and I won't be able to take care of everyone. But maybe something I could do is explore, say, an avenue of teaching to be able to train other people.
Oh,
So that could be something. But
teaching
other than that, I
embalming.
think, sorry.
Teaching embalming to others.
Yeah, teaching
Ah.
embalming, and then I think naturally as I get a little bit older, the actual funeral directing side, I think I'll become more involved in meeting with the families and organizing all of the details, and I suppose just continue to grow the business, and like the motto of the family, just take it on and leave it a little bit better for the next generation, hopefully. But I think I love Galway, so I definitely see my future here.
A good friend of mine is also an undertaker. We were talking about this before we recorded. Clive Anderson, he's from County Cork, and he didn't grow up in an undertaker's family, but his dad passed away when he was young. He was around 15, I think. And he said there was something about watching the undertakers come in. He said, I remember they were so well dressed and they were so attentive to what they were doing in professional. And he remembers the comfort it brought his family that he claims when I interviewed him at 15, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And then he did an internship with the guy in Mayo. What's his name? You told me beforehand.
The gown,
McGowan. He's in Mayo, is it?
yeah,
So, and then he gave him advice and said, Clive, look, here in Ireland, it's a good family business, but if you want to turn it into a big business, you have to go to the United States. And he did that. He went to Pelham, New York, and he opened up a boutique funeral home, because in America, I don't think it's the same in Ireland. There are these big companies that buy up a lot of funeral homes. So you would have chains, like a funeral home chain. That's not the case in Ireland, is it?
no, yeah, in Dublin you'd have some families that have bought up other places, but I think it's one of the only countries in the world that has remained predominantly family based.
Yeah, he was telling me there's like the Starbucks equivalent of a funeral home where they just have them all across the country, but you don't get that attention to detail. Like you said, the phones are switched off at a certain hour and people have gone home. But when I've been talking to him, I've went and stayed at him a few times in his house when he was living right above the undertakers, and his personal life suffers. He told me he could be on a date on a Friday night with the girl he thinks he's going to marry, and next thing his phone would ring and he has to cut it short and go. So do you find it that your personal life, and I can see you smirking now,
Yeah, no,
does it suffer?
definitely. I'm lucky that I have a supportive family and I have a very supportive girlfriend who kind of puts up with it. But that's a really common thing, nearly a weekly thing, where I'll go out to her house and I'll have just gotten in the door and the phone will ring. We need you back.
And you'll
So
say,
I'll be
hey,
gone. Yeah.
good to see you.
So thankfully she's very supportive. Um,
What does
but
she
yeah,
think of the work? How does she get her head around it?
it's amazing. At the start, I didn't want to tell her, especially the embalming side. I said I was a hearse driver, or I'd washed the hearses or whatever. Um,
That's even stranger.
I know.
I'm a hearse driver, love. On your first date.
And then I suppose Galway so small that she would have known the family business and stuff like that. And it was her mom is actually a nurse, and I was speaking to her about, I suppose, the anatomy and the more like detailed aspects of the embalming. And I was telling her that I was actually qualified, and she, straight away they were so supportive and everything. And then I told Aoife, my girlfriend, and she's been nothing but supportive since then. But she's just always made it clear that she will never have anything to do with it, that it's not her. That wouldn't it wouldn't interest her whatsoever.
She'll never get into your family business.
Yeah,
It's
so
not for her. That's funny. That's great. And how long are you dating?
over 2 years now.
Great.
So
That's fantastic. And when are you going to take her on a weekend away?
when I get the invite for Rome, we'll call over to you.
Listen, hang on a second. Hello, Pope Francis? Yeah, he's here now. Yeah, he did his altar serving. He's in Galway. Okay, you can come on over,
Perfect.
Pope Francis said. Well, listen, Ronan, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I had all these notes, but I think I didn't look down at them once because it was a... Thanks for being so open and honest in your telling of the story, because I know it is a thing that some people find very difficult to talk about. Others find it very gory. And when I reached out to you, I'm sure you were worried maybe that I wanted to sensationalize it or try and get...
No, and like I was saying to you earlier, I was like, will I prepare some stuff? And I feel like it's more natural just to be able to talk about it. And I suppose it's what I've grown up with, so I'm used to talking about it. I'm used to dealing with it every day. So I hope I answered some of your questions without waffling too much.
You were great. Ireland's youngest embalmer, doing your family proud. Thank you so much for doing the interview.
Thanks, Colm.